Welcome, everybody, back to the Sean Trey Show. I've got a really awesome guest with me today, and I would just like to tell people a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure thing. My name's Asher. Thanks, Sean. Once again, I'm the owner of Dahlgren Social. We're a social media agency. Small businesses come to us because they don't have the time or the expertise to manage their own social media, and I'm excited to be on today.
That's awesome, man. How did you get into this business? You know, our entire world is social media right now. Like, what got you into this business and started you down this path?
Yeah, truthfully, I've always been an entrepreneur, and what made me go into social media, besides being active on social media myself and knowing about it and liking it, is I thought it's very difficult to compete with the majority of business owners who are 2-3 times my age because they have so much more expertise. But the one area where I could compete and be better than those that are 2-3 times my age is in social media, because Gen Z, we know social media, we get the platforms, we pick up the trends. So I just knew that I could provide value to businesses in a way that other generations couldn't, because I think what kind of makes us stand out is we're a team of young people, right? And we know social media, we know it the best. So that's why I really chose social media as like, hey, I want to start this business, and it's just grown ever since.
Well, one of the things that you tapped on there that I want to bring up, and I absolutely love, is, in business, when you sit there and with entrepreneurship, when you start looking at, building businesses, building ideas, building concepts, what can you do that can provide value? And you just said that right there, like, you can provide value. And it's one of the things I think people forget. I'm a huge zombie movie fan, and my wife and I were, before she went to bed. It's late. I'm in Asia right now, and so my wife was just heading to bed, and wow, I got a thumbs up on the screen. That's awesome. And she was watching the Korean zombie TV show Kingdom. An absolutely amazing TV show. It's like set back in I think it's like 1600s in Korea, or maybe earlier. And so it's like a historical timepiece, but they threw zombies in, which is rad, But one of the things that you notice with zombie movies is that characters that don't have a skill, that cannot provide value in some way to the group or they get cast aside, man. You have to provide value if you want to find a place in this world. And I love that you're talking about that there, because to me it makes so much sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found it to be, because of my age, like, it can be a struggle to find something that, we can actually compete with older people on, that have much more expertise. But I was like, social media, small business owners, they definitely don't have the time, but they're also from another generation where they don't have the expertise either. So I found that this was the one niche where we could really excel at. And I believe I started when I was 15, probably, the business. It's been 2.5 years now. I'm 17 now. So yeah, man, it's been great ever since.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's like, one of the reasons that I wanted to speak with you as well was because you are 17. You're doing this thing that's like, other people are sitting there. There are so many people that sit there and say, you know what, I'm going to start this business. You know what, I'm going to do this someday. And they spin their wheels and spin their wheels and spin their wheels. But you did it. What was the catalyst that said, at 15, like, I'm going to start my own business? What was it that kicked you, down that path?
I think I've just always been incredibly motivated, and I wanted something, I guess you could say, more, just beyond the traditional teenage job washing dishes. I worked in food service prior to starting my business, and I just wanted something bigger. I think I wanted to feel like it, not just for the money, but I wanted to feel like I was contributing back in a bigger way, so that was a big motivator. I like to go by the saying, do, be. Most people think you have to be a certain person to do certain things, but really who you become is defined by your actions. So I told myself, I was like, if I just do, not think, but do, start the business, launch the website, start the socials, do the outreach, perform for clients. If I do, I will become a successful business owner then, so that was kind of the mantra that I kept in mind.
That is some deep wisdom right there. And it doesn't matter how old you are. That's some deep wisdom, because it's like one of the things too that I was, that I met this one person who was like, came up to me, they said, I want to be a podcaster. And I was like, okay, cool. That's rad. And they're like, how do I do it, Sean? And I was like, how did you do it? And I was like, I'm a podcaster. And I was like, hang on. I never defined myself as a person who makes podcasts. I never defined myself as a YouTuber or that, but I just went out and made YouTube videos. I just went out and made podcasts. And, you know, and I teach a class at a university, and I wish my students had that mindset, because I was like, they're like, well, what do we have to do to become successful? And I was like, just make your next piece of content. Like, that's what you got to do. It's like you wake up and you go, what can I post today? What can I create today? You know, what can I put out to the world? Because one step at a time, like, you know, you get someone who starts swimming, right? Are you a swimmer? Well, you might not view yourself as a swimmer, but if you get out and you're swimming every single damn day, well, you know, after a couple of weeks, you're a swimmer, man. You know, it's like you're doing it. So I love that. Yeah, well, that's nice.
Yeah, and I think so many people, when I see this thinking pattern, I always point it out. It's, you know, I'm not this person, or I'm not a wealthy person, or a knowledgeable person, or an expert in this, an expert in that, so I can't do this. That's not, I always like to call that out, because that's not how anybody should be thinking. It should be, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to do this, and then I will become this. So sounds like we completely agree. It's just such a catalyst and mindset shift there.
Yeah, well, you know, that's like, so much of this is a mindset shift. There was this one story, and again, I don't know if it's one of those internet stories or if it was an actually true story, but it was an interesting thing. I remember when I was reading about the way they trained elephants, and they would start out with training these elephants by tying them to a tree. It was in I have no idea where, but they were training these elephants, and we're not even getting into the ethics of what they were doing there, because, you know, elephants are these beautiful wild creatures that should definitely be roaming free. But this is what they were doing. They were tying these baby elephants to the tree, and they were using a pretty small rope or chain, and the elephants were not able to break it. But they kept them in this place. As the elephants got older and older and older, they didn't necessarily increase the chain size. And so the elephants didn't try to break free, because they were contained by the memory of what was tough for them when they were younger, you know? And so it's like, we all are that elephant. We get into that place where there is, you hear it, you know, like, I'll get people that come up to me and say, hey, I want to be the guy that makes 100,000 a year. I want to be the guy that's making 200,000 a year. And I was like, all right, what are you making right now? 50,000. All right, well, how can you get to 70? I can't get to 70. That's just too hard. And you're like, well, you got to start thinking about that. There was one great book that I was listening to today, and the author, I think it's like I'll have to beat myself. I don't normally swear on it, but How to Unfuck Your Life is the title of the book. And it's this great book. And the guy's got this great Scottish accent that sometimes morphs into like this Los Angeles accent. It's a little bit wild. But he's talking about how you've got to shift your mindset, because he's like, making 40,000 a year versus making 80,000 a year, it's not any harder. It's the same amount of hours in the day. Right. It's just you are tapping into something different. You're tapping into a different level of perceived value. But, you know, the guy who's going in and making 200,000 a year and the guy that's making 40,000 a year are putting in the same amount of work. You know, maybe there's more, a little bit more, a little bit less, but they're still investing energy. You just have to invest it into a place in a way that you have value, or that people perceive you have value, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that. We are all kind of like that elephant by instinct, but, you know, breaking out of that is very important. I got a book very similar to that on my shelf. It's The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. You know, that the Mark Manson one.
That's a great book.
It's another great one too. Yeah. And I've heard good things about both. They're definitely both very good self-help books.
Right. You know, we all need a little bit of those in our life. Well, so you sat down. I want to go through your mental process here. Okay, you've always been entrepreneurial. You're 15 years old, and what resources did you start digging into? Where did you start looking, and what were the things that you put into place to kind of open up your business?
That's a good question. That gets me thinking back. I kind of categorized it into there's the setup part, which is at the time it's the most difficult step to take, because it's actually starting the business, right? So it's the website, getting the domains, the business structure, the bank accounts, all those basic things, and then following that, once you have a product, I drafted the business plan, I wrote down all of the content that we'd be doing, who we'd be using for that, and once we got the planning done, it was really a matter of outreach. And I think when I first started, I believe I was door knocking. I remember that was 2 years ago. I went through Chestnut Hill. It's outside of Philadelphia, near me, town, part of Philadelphia. And I just knocked on businesses. I asked for the business owner. I said, "This is what I do. This is how I can help you." I think my first client was working hourly for a real estate company. So there was that. And then I believe we got 2 more clients in the first few months. And then, yeah, since then, obviously we scaled up outreach. We do a lot of other marketing, but that was kind of like the starting phase.
That's awesome, man. Were there any challenges that mentally, things that were difficult to overcome, or challenges that you had to overcome to kind of grow or change your mindset?
I would say definitely my age, because it's just natural for someone to view a 17-year-old as not credible at something. But I think because, I'm an expert in social media, my generation is, and compounding that with marketing knowledge that I've educated myself on and got hands-on experience with, I overcame that imposter syndrome quickly, especially when I realized that my clients are really benefiting from that. I get on testimonial calls, double, tripling engagement. Your posts look great. And sometimes, especially during the start, I didn't even realize that, but these people give me this great feedback, and I'm like, I really got something here. And so that confidence issue during the beginning is no longer an issue anymore.
2 things I want to touch on there. I love that. First, that's awesome. The confidence and the overcoming imposter syndrome, because again, like going back to the swimmer or going back to any type of a story like that, any of us can sit there and look at, I'm interviewing for a new job, and you match 8 out of 10 of the different skills that are required for the job, right? But those 2 that are left, even if you're highly skilled, and you've been doing this a long time, those 2 things can make you feel really like a fish out of water, or maybe you've got 1 skill out of 10. And you're a highly competent individual, and you can totally pull this thing off, But you have to sit there and dive into the deep end sometimes and go, I feel uncomfortable. But I think that we're so conditioned to want comfort that we forget that if you are going to grow, you have to have a little bit of those growing pains. You got to step out of your comfort zone. It's like,
yeah,
wow. It's a little bit sunny out here. Well, I'm going to get used to that. I'm going to get used to this. Next time I'll bring a hat. Next time I'll do this. But you got to step out and you got to do it to learn what it is that you have to get past. How do you think people in general can kind of overcome imposter syndrome?
That's a good question. I overcame it by getting genuine feedback from others, asking for feedback, whether it's good or bad. The bad stuff I'd use to improve. The longer I've been in this business, the more it's only been good stuff. And then the good feedback really reinforces confidence, and you don't even have to talk yourself up because your clients do. So that's the ideal scenario that you will put yourself in, where if you're applying for that job, maybe you feel some of that imposter syndrome starting out, but when you start working, ask your boss for feedback. How did this project go, right? And if it's negative, you'll get better. If it's positive, that is how I overcame imposter syndrome, and how I'd recommend anybody else to, is just ask for feedback genuinely, use it to improve or use it to boost yourself up.
I love that. Well, one of the other things too that you pointed out there was that because you are younger, you have this open mind. There was this great thing that the comes from like Eastern philosophy, the idea of mushin. And I studied martial arts for a long time. And so one of the interesting things is when a guy, when a master becomes very high, they go back to the beginning. And it's like you can go back to the beginning and you have to look at things in a fresh way. And one of the things that I think that happened and is happened with social media that's been wild is that, film and television was this established industry and it was really rigid. Like we're talking crazy levels of rigid. I remember when I was trying to get my break in Hollywood and stuff, and I would go in there and I'd talk to someone like, "Oh, you're not allowed to talk to that person." I'm like, "Why not?" And they're like, "Well, to talk to that person, you need an agent, and the agent has to go through this channel and that channel." And all of a sudden, YouTube came along, and all these YouTubers were just making stuff and doing things their way, and they got big, and they started making a lot of money. And when they started hiring people that came up from the Hollywood system, they were encountering a bunch of people who said, "No, that's not able to be done. You can't do that." And I remember talking to some of the people at Mr. Beast and his team, and they're like, what happens? We come to you and we're going to tell you you're a producer and you're going to we want to film dropping a house. You're going to drop a house? Yeah. We want to lift it up with a crane and drop it. You're the person talking to that crane operator and telling him what we're doing. And he's going to be like, no. How do we get this person to see this is possible? And one of the things that they found was that they were hiring younger people. They were hiring people who had this mentality of, yeah, let's try it. What could go wrong? We follow the safety. We make sure that there's no one under the house. And then we do it. And one of the things with that comes along this idea of people willing to try more. And all of these great technological revolutions in history have come about by someone going, hey, let's try something new. But youth often has the benefit of not having established dogma, So I think there's such a powerful approach, and that even if people are older, the idea of looking at things with a fresh perspective is such a huge thing,
Yeah, and I think to that point, I've just seen such a growth in young entrepreneurship since, with new technology, it's just been a massive growth.
Right.
You just see a lot more young people doing more unconventional things. They call it like a gig economy where it's less traditional 9 to 5 among the Gen Z generation, and more, freelancing or starting businesses. And I think that's great because I think that, pursuing that route gives you a lot more just experience because you're on your own. You're not, given a typical job where, you have set expectations, set directions. I think it's a good experience to have both, but that sort of atypical way of working now, I think that business experience that a lot of young people are getting, because I see it a lot more, it really does build skills that are then transferable to other businesses or other projects that you would then want to pursue.
I had a guest on to my Growing Money podcast that had a really interesting perspective when he was talking about how he was like telling his sons a lesson, and they were like, he was saying, when you're dealing with imposter syndrome or something else, and he's like, get in the water and start swimming, and it's like, even if whatever it is, man, swim, baby, swim, and dive in. And when you're sitting there going, wow, this is deeper than I thought, but you learn. We just went to Hawaii to visit my uncle. My uncle's got a place there. And yeah, definitely. And so we were like, my daughter was in a swimming pool and she had been this mediocre swimmer. And my uncle just was like, get her in the water, let her swim. And we're like, well, do we need this and that? And he's like, I've seen her swim. It's there. She's lacking confidence. That's the only thing she's lacking right now. And he's like, the pool is not taller than her head. It's like it comes up to here on her. let her swim. And so we were a little nervous, and we were just like, finally, we were like, all right, just go for it. And I was like, I'll swim with you, but you're not getting this and that, your floaties, your arm floaties or whatever. You just got to swim. And after 3 days, she was a fish. I kid you not, and it was just the confidence that was needed. And so often, like we go back to what we had talked about earlier, like that mentality, like, I can't do that. I'm not a swimmer. Like there's our swimmer thing again, it's like, but you won't know if you're a swimmer unless you start swimming.
Yeah. Yeah. I think right behind me is one of my Philadelphia Today articles I was featured in. I believe they quoted me saying, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's so true.
Oh.
I live by that mantra too. You have to do things that make you uncomfortable. There's no way around it. There's absolutely no way around it, because if you think about it, the only way you grow, whether it's making more money, getting to know more people, doing bigger, more valuable things, you have to expand, and expansion takes energy. It takes uncomfort. That is a prerequisite. So you have to get uncomfortable. I say do one thing uncomfortable every day, even if it doesn't tie into your direct mission. Let's say your mission is to make more money. Do one thing uncomfortable, even if it's completely unrelated to that, because that way you get used to the feeling of uncomfort, so you can do more uncomfortable things that work towards your actual goal.
I love that. Yeah, I love that a lot. I have my black belt in judo, and one of the things that you learn with judo is that you fall down a lot. Yeah. And judo, you're just getting planted, man. Jiu-jitsu, you're rolling. It's discomfort. You've got joints and stuff that are getting tweaked. But with judo, it's like someone tossing you and you slam down. And the thing is like, people ask me, well, how did you get a black belt in judo? And I said, I kept standing up. I kept getting up. Every time I fell down, I was like, that sucked. Let's get up and go again. And that was it. You just keep getting up. But growing, every time I learned a new throw, I was so excited. I was like, oh yeah, man, I get to jump up and flip in the air before spinning down. Yeah. Well, you know what? When I got to do it, it was a lot of fun. But when someone else was jumping up in the air and then yanking me by my head into the mat, that hurt. It was like every single time you hit, you're like, wow, that was and on cold days, it hurt more than hot days. Hot days, that mat got nice and soft and squishy. Cold days, it was like landing on concrete. Mm-hmm. But you know what? You keep going through it. And every day that you do it, one of the things that you notice is you start getting tougher. Yeah. It's like, my daughter, I have a makiwara thing, which is it's a knuckle conditioning thing, and I hit it 100 times a day. And she's like, why do you do that? Does it hurt? I was like, it used to. It doesn't hurt as much now. Well, why not? Because I got used to it. I got stronger. And I think that's one of the things that so many of us, until we start getting discomfort, going through discomfort, we don't get stronger.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. I've done some martial arts myself, and that any sport to really, that's the kind of uncomfortable that you go through every day if you're training in that sport, and it's so transferable to other things, because when you're used to that temporary pain, you get better at enduring that pain in other areas of your life, in your business, for example. So I think that sports, especially independent sports like martial arts, are incredible for that.
That's awesome. What are, as you are now in your business and you're looking to grow your business, what are some of the things that you're working on to start growing things bigger?
Yeah, I love that question. That's where my mind's at all the time. So it really comes down to, I'm thinking at things through this framework now, which is, there's 3 pillars, right? There's lead flow, there's conversions, actually converting those leads, and then there's fulfillment, but not just fulfillment to retain, right? You want to keep clients, customers happy, keep that value coming. And so I advise any business owner to find which pillar is your biggest bottleneck. Maybe it's fulfillment. Maybe you don't have the proper team set up yet. Maybe it's lead flow. You're just not getting bites. Maybe it's conversions. Maybe your prospects are not seeing the value in your offer. But find the weakest bottleneck and improve on that, and then improve on the next biggest bottleneck. So that's the framework that I've been thinking through. I would say for us, I mean, we got a solid team. We're getting inquiries a lot. We get a lot of our clients from cold outreach. I handpick businesses that I like to work with because only so many are qualified to work with us. So I like to handpick those businesses and reach out to them. So we're really just scaling up those outreach campaigns, hiring some new support staff, and yeah, just scaling each of those pillars equally. It definitely takes up a lot of my day. You know, there's a domain starts sending the spam, and I need to warm up new domains for my outreach campaigns, or someone on my team has to step away for a second because they got something going on. So it's always a constant battle. But if you can get all those three pillars strong, that's how you grow a business.
I love the balancing act. There is always this balance as a creative, as a team lead, as a business owner, as a parent, as whatever aspect it is in your life. There's this balance that you have to. I became intimately aware of that when I became a father. You know, I had all of these. Even tonight, my wife wanted my attention while my daughter wanted my attention while I was prepping for my podcast. And I had to stand there kind of in the middle. And I was laughing about it because I was looking over toward my wife. She's saying something to me, and my daughter's like, "You're not paying attention to me." So I'm leaning back this way. And the irony is that you have to be able to kind of sit in the middle and float and adapt to whatever the situation brings. You know, if you have a client that needs their hand held as you're working on the conversion, you know, you got to sit there and hold that hand. If you have, you know, someone who's sick, then you have to figure out ways to pick up that slack. One of the things this last year that I really loved diving into is I started researching and learning more about project management, because for a long time in video production, people ask what I do, and I was like, I get shit done. And one of my mentors said, "But are you getting the right shit done?" And I was like, oh, I like that. I like that mentality and that mindset, because, you know, we can all be active, but are you getting the right actions done that get you towards your goal? You know, and again, there's this idea of balancing, but there's also this idea of vision. You know, it's like, I like to talk about the mariners of old, and like this, they were sailing across the seas. They had the little sextant, and they could look up at the stars and kind of chart their course. But they were every night having to reevaluate where they were at. And are we heading toward our goal? Are we making progress toward, you know, whatever you want to be making progress towards? And in your own life, are you making progress towards making your first million? Are you making progress toward, you know, leveling up and getting a job that pays you $70,000? Whatever it might be for you, are you making progress on that goal? Because if you're not, you got to reevaluate that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to that point, if you can clearly define the problem, then you're halfway towards a solution, I believe. If you can state explicitly what is stopping you from achieving desired goal, and just working back from that, finding what exact steps you need to take towards solving that problem, getting towards that goal, and then only channeling your energy towards those tasks. Cut out all the rest. Yes, stuff needs to get done. Try and delegate it. Try and automate it, or just scrap it. If it's not pushing you towards your ultimate goal, just scrap it. Only focus on the things that work up to that problem you're trying to solve.
I love that. I have, give me a second, I have somewhere over here. The Eisenhower. Do you ever hear about the Eisenhower diagram? So President Eisenhower. Yeah, I love it, man. Yeah, so it's like, you got the top quadrant is urgent and important. You got to do that first. Over here, you have not urgent, important, and that one you schedule. Bottom right, you got urgent, not important, delegate. And then bottom left, urgent and not urgent, not important, and you get rid of it.
Yep.
Cut it, man. And so many times I will have things that I'm carrying around, and then when I put them into that diagram, I'm like, yeah, that's not even helping me. And you just have to cut that stuff away. Timothy Ferriss, in his book, The 4-Hour Workweek, talks about how one of the most important things that you can do is to start trimming everything off, trim the excess. Because even with like the 80-20 principle, like of all the stuff that you're doing, only 20% of it is bringing you the results that you really want. You know,
Yep.
in a business, 20% of the clients are often the ones that are bringing in most of the business. You know, in anything that's going on in a group where people are working in, you know, and 20% of the employees are doing most of the work. And so looking at that and finding, well, where are we losing our you know, momentum, and cutting that? You know, maybe it's I noticed it with a friend that I had recently that I kind of cut ties with. Love the person to pieces. They're, you know, who they are. But every time that I would hang out with them, I would find new problems that were creeping up in my life. And I was just like, love you to death, man. But, you know, kind of had to step back. And my life has been more peaceful since cutting that person out. So not hating on them, but, you know, definitely the results show what was going on.
And I always used to wonder, you know, why are you so conservative with your time, that kind of deal. But as soon as I started trimming the things, the excess fat, you know, I get it now. It's like you really have to focus on just the things that are pulling you towards your mission. I find that when I do focus on those things, it can get very boring sometimes. It's just me behind the computer. And that's why I do have to do other things like, you know, get out and network with people, go on podcasts like this. I have to do those things. I enjoy those things, and I have to do them to keep me, I guess, motivated. I don't know. I think that doing the most productive things that pull me towards my goal, it takes discipline instead of like, hey, I really love and want to do this. But it's like, you just got to do the stuff that even if you don't want to do, you just have to do it. But then you also want to schedule in other things that are like, you know, more enjoyable tasks within your business as well, or more enjoyable meetings, for example. I say if you enjoy it or if it makes you money, you know, keep it on the calendar. If it doesn't, you know, get rid of it.
You're tapping into something that I really like as well. And it's like one of the things that I had a guest on my Growing Money podcast recently, and I just posted the episode with him, and he was talking about financial freedom. And the whole thing that he was looking at was his why. Your why is one of the most important things that you can nail down as you are building your business, building your empire, or building your family, but whatever you're building, you know? So for me, one of the things that's so important, I was looking at a big shift recently about whether to move from one place to another or to change kind of my geolocation. And I decided to stay where I'm at. And the reason was because one of my core whys is to provide the best life I can for my daughter. And I was starting to look at where I'm at, what I can do, and what I can provide and build here is better than what my options would be if I went somewhere else, because that's my why. And so for me, the decisions I made were easy to make. And the things that I cut out and decided not to go down, or paths I decided not to explore, were easy for me because I had a clear why. What's your why that motivates you as you build all of this stuff?
I enjoy helping small businesses. I'm always the one that I won't go to Starbucks. I'll go to the local coffee shop down the street.
I love that.
I genuinely have vested gratitude towards small businesses. And there's a lot of small businesses in my area. And I know at this point, hundreds, if not thousands of entrepreneurs. Like I've gotten to know so many people, and I see the blood, the sweat, the tears, everything that goes in behind the business. And it's huge. And I think that, you know, in the US, we're an economy based around entrepreneurship. And if I can do my part as an entrepreneur myself with a product that can help other entrepreneurs, that makes me feel fulfilled. And I just love it even more that I have a team along with me that's participating in that mission. That's
awesome. And, you know, something we don't talk about enough these days is that the idea about supporting the small businesses, supporting the mom and pop shops, supporting the places that are making and putting out awesome stuff. On my recent trip to visit home, I went into a couple mom and pop shops And like everything had changed though. Is like they were like, well, we're having a really hard time. And I was like, why? We're like, we're having to compete with all these giant businesses that have moved in, all these corporate interests that have moved in. And it's just really hard. And so it was interesting because I started saying, well, what do you think you could change? What do you think? And they said, it needs to be, we need to educate people. We need to share a mindset that, that the important stuff is everywhere. Certainly there's a nice thing to convenience and fast, but you got to remember that there's real stories. Like in my old hometown, there was this lady named Liza, and Liza had this small hole in the wall bookstore that was probably one of the coolest places you could go into. And her selection of books that she had was so carefully curated. She was a book snob and she knew all of the best stuff. And I mean, in that bookstore, every time I walked in there, I just was like, there was never a time. I've been into many big bookstores, and I'm not going to hate on the big bookstores. They've got great stuff in them too. But there was never a time that I walked into her bookstore that I didn't buy a book, because there was just something in there that was that good. And then I think about it, like, I don't think she's working there anymore. I think she sold the bookstore, just, growing up, growing older. But I was sitting there thinking, man, if she had have had that bookstore in this day and age, and she could have been throwing up on social media all of these great book tips, like, hey, you got to check this out. This is what I curated this week. This is the bookstore this is the book I just found. And one of the people that I love to follow, and he's now doing that, is Ryan Holiday, who, from the Daily Stoic. And he is, he's got this great bookstore down in Austin now, I think actually in Bastrop, Texas. And he curates these amazing books, and he's sharing it all the time on his social media. And every time I watch his page, I'm like, ooh, I'm going to buy that. And listening to great information. And it's like, there is this power that especially Gen Z has to share this passion and to share this stuff on socials that is just really powerful. And, we can make a big change in our society. We can support really cool people by just getting out there and learning how to share content.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that what a lot of business owners mistake when it comes to social media is you don't need to have the most polished corporate-like posts. What you need is to speak the community language, and so we like to, when we write copy, speak down to earth, speak how the area speaks. We don't like to use language that's stale or corporate-y. We like to talk like we're another person, even though we're representing a company. Because if you think about why people are on Facebook, why people are on Instagram, because they want to connect with people. They go on there to connect with family and friends. And that's why inherently businesses get less engagement than if your family member was to make a post. But if we can adopt the language of a person, of something, of an organization that's down to earth, part of the community, that's the approach that we like to take, because that always hits the hardest. And I think that that's a step towards, valuing our mom and pop shops, our small businesses more, is speaking that language. And I think that in regards to the consumer, sometimes we can take for granted, if someone's not a business owner, they could take for granted the tremendous work that goes behind that business. And so I think it's really important that we continue to support those small businesses.
What are some of your maybe top 2 tips that people can follow to get really awesome social media?
The big thing right now is video, of course, short form video. I often find that people assume that the pretty graphics will perform good because they look good. It turns out that the best performing posts are the ones that are off the cuff, raw types of videos. People love to see that from businesses. So we like to take that approach. The other thing is reciprocation on social media is huge. So engaging with other people, be it other businesses, other individuals, figures in the community, that's huge too, because those people will reciprocate and return the favor, engage with you, follow you. it's a networking platform. They call it social media networking for a reason. It is networking. You have to give to get. We engage on behalf of our clients' accounts. That's super powerful as well.
That's awesome. If you could go back in time, I mean, you have a lot of time ahead of you still, which is awesome. But you could go back and still in good time and give yourself some advice. What advice would you give yourself?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I haven't thought of that. This is more holistic, less business specific. But I oftentimes notice when I'm going through an obstacle or a hard time now that I really realized after the fact that it wasn't such a big deal and it will pass. There's a saying, this too shall pass. I don't know where I heard that from, but it's such a great mantra as well. And I think the obstacles that we encounter, whether it's business or life, we oftentimes blow it up to be a bigger thing than it is. And I think if I told myself, like, the obstacles that you're going through now and, the contracts that you're trying to close now 2 years ago pale in comparison to what I'm doing now. And what I'm doing now pales in comparison to what I'm going to be doing later. So if I could tell myself, this is not as big of a deal as you're making it out to be, this will pass, you will get through this, that would probably be very powerful, because I look back and, the money I made last year, the year before that, the experience completely outweighs any financial benefit. And so if I kind of allowed my younger self to have that shift in mindset where it's like, hey, this will pass, you're going to get great experience from it, you're going to learn to be able to be uncomfortable more, for example, that would have probably put me at ease and allowed me to really focus on the things that are going to get me experience and not things that, are little and menial. So I think that would be really